taking me. And now, your hosts for The Quilt Show, Alex Anderson and Ricky Timms.
Oh, there you are. Welcome to The Quilt Show, everyone. I've been looking for you and I have found you. Goodness gracious, this is a very unusual set for The Quilt Show, but it relates to a very special project that I'm involved in called Lizzy Albright in the Attic Window. It's a new novel and it's all based on a quilt, actually, and that's going to be a fun thing because we want to share that story with you today. Now, I couldn't have done this without my very good friend, Kat Bowser, who is all the way from Florida. Please welcome Kat Bowser to The Quilt Show. Come on in here, Miss Kat. This is my friend. Yay! Oh my gosh, it's like elbow bumps and all of that, right? So have a seat and let's tell everybody a little bit about what we've been doing. But first, let's tell them about how we met.
First, can I tell them why I look like this?
Okay. And I look like this. It's kind of strange.
1964, and we don't know when.
We don't know when I am. I'm kind of like a steampunk weirdness, but it relates to the story. So stay with us and you'll figure it all out.
So we met back in the 80s on a music collaboration, which was big fun for us, and have been friends ever since. So we continue to do a lot of music projects together, which I love and adore. But it was in the early 2000s that we reconnected and decided that I would come on board and start working on some projects with you. And I just felt like the beautiful quilts that are being made now and back in the day really aren't getting their just due, and they needed to be exposed to a larger crowd. And what could we do that would be a project that would bridge those generations and bring it and make it fresh?
Well, two things. Kat's an amazing singer, and you're going to sing at the very end of the show. So stick around till all of that because she is amazing. I'm excited about that. But you talk about expanding. We wanted to expand to a younger generation. You really thought, wouldn't it be nice if Grandma the Quilter, or Grandpa the Quilter in my case, I'm not really a grandpa, but I look like one, right? Wouldn't it be great if this could cross way down into a younger generation?
Exactly.
And we were talking about quilt blocks.
Well, you were teaching the names of the blocks to me. Although I sew very little bit, I wasn't that familiar with quilting, even though my grandmother and my mother were quilters. So one time I went to a convention with you, and you were explaining some antique quilts to me and telling me and teaching me the names of the blocks. And there was Flying Geese and Bear Paw and Scotty Dog, which was a personal favorite, and Sunbonnet Sue. And I was like, Ricky, these are characters to me. They're classic characters. They need to have a story written about them.
Right, and you approached me about doing a story where originally it was going to be like a children's, maybe even a picture book or
something very simple.
And a granny and a kid, and they get together and they end up making this quilt. And that's kind of what we've done, except it went...
We thought this was going to be so easy. We were going to just do this little project and it would be no big thing to write a simple book about something that you love and something that I was exploring.
Sure.
It didn't turn out that way.
It didn't turn out that way. So now, before I actually give you the quilt, because I want to show you the quilt, I want to tell everybody that we are in the attic because Lizzy Albright is celebrating her 10th birthday in 1964.
Correct.
And her granny's mansion, the McHale Mansion, in a place called Cordelia, Kansas. And she loves to go into the attic. And inside the cedar chest, she discovers Granny's quilt that was made during the Great Depression. And from that, she gets to sleep under the quilt. She learns the names of the blocks. She discovers what the fabrics look like. All of that's very well described. But then during the night, she hears tapping noise and she discovers it's coming from the attic. And she goes and she ends up finding a goose, the flying goose, in the attic window. So there is why we're sitting here in the attic today.
Exactly.
And our story really starts once she's out the attic, and it's no longer 1964. It's no longer Kansas. It's truly
not in Kansas anymore.
You're not in Kansas anymore. So that's where this whole story is going to. But I do want to talk about the quilt because the quilt is what inspired the whole thing.
Absolutely.
I like to tell people that in The Wizard of Oz, the tornado is a big important thing. It gets Dorothy from the farm to Oz.
Right.
The quilt in our story, this is not a story about a quilt. It's a story about a girl with courage and bravery, and there's deception and all these horrible things that happen as well. But it's the quilt that gets her from A to B. So let's talk about the quilt. This is Granny's 1930 sampler. She would have made it during the Great Depression.
Right.
And we're just really lucky to have found this quilt. Because, I mean, you know, the Albright family had it for years, and it's just so lovely that we've been able to have this quilt, and now that we can make this quilt. So some of the blocks that are in this quilt, as you mentioned, we've got the bear paw block that plays into the story. The honeybee block plays into the story. Robbing Peter to pay Paul.
That's such a story. We don't even know the story about that.
We don't.
Scandalous.
And of course the setting for all the blocks is attic window,
right, exactly.
Which is the window that we're at. And I'll just pop over here to show everybody. Sure enough, it's called the book is called Lizzy Albright and the Attic Window. And then of course the goose plays a very important role in the story. And if you look at the border is flying geese with 9 patches kind of set in them. I had honestly a lot of fun designing this quilt.
Oh, it was brilliant watching you do it, actually.
And when we were collaborating together, you kept going, Ricky, could you just draw the quilt? Just show me the quilt. Just show me the quilt. I want to see the quilt.
Because it would inspire part of the story for me.
Sure.
Those block names and patterns and things would spark something in my imagination. I'd be, oh, well, we got to bring that character in here.
And why 1964? Why this era? And why Kansas?
They say write about what you know. And since this is my first endeavor at something this daunting to me, I had to tap into what I know. And that's the 60s and growing up in Kansas and having a granny's attic that had fun things to play in and an old cedar chest. I still have Grandma's cedar chest.
And the cedar chest that we've got today is an old trunk, but it's the best we can do and it works, right?
Close.
So now I want to tell everybody that I've gone back to my roots with this because while I really am a contemporary quilter and I love doing art quilts, I am very fond of old quilts. My first quilt is a sampler quilt. And the beautiful thing about a sampler quilt is that you learn so much.
Exactly.
I remember it was 1991. I did not know another quilter. I didn't know cotton fabrics from polyester fabrics. I'm just making this quilt. But every time I made a block, even when it wasn't sewn in the quilt, I would go, oh, I learned how to do Jacob's ladder. Oh, I got to learn how to do the grandmother's fan. Oh, these are called goose tracks. And oh, this one is called shoe fly.
They're all characters.
And I just was so excited that I was learning. And I was learning so many techniques. So one of the beautiful things about this quilt is now we have the pattern. We have people, you can make this quilt, the Lizzy Albright quilt, the Granny's 1930 sampler. You can do that, but our goal is to get you doing it with youngsters, right?
That's the whole thing.
Even though this quilt is more daunting, so my quilt is a sampler, and it shows all of those different blocks that I did during that time. So that's kind of where my roots are, and coming back to this project is really, really kind of part of that whole circle, coming full circle. The next quilt we want to look at, Kat, is one of your quilts. This is in your cedar chest, right?
It is. This was in my grandmother's cedar chest, and I was fortunate enough to inherit several of her quilts. This happens to be the oldest one in our family, and my grandmother used to label everything. She'd put little notes on everything, and I pulled this one out of the cedar chest, and this old yellowed index card has her handwriting on it, and explains where this quilt came from. Pieced by Leuna, what a great name, Leuna Ness, grandmother of Estill Marie, which is my mother. So it's my great-grandmother, and it was pieced in 1935. So I'm just honored to have this still in our family, and of course I'll be passing that one down.
Sure, and I have to give you a little piece of advice, and that is, let's photocopy this, let's get it on fabric or get it printed on fabric so that that actual label can become a fabric label on the back of that quilt.
Oh, fantastic. I would love that.
Yeah, that'll be a good way to document that, and it's in her handwriting.
It is,
so that's super. All right, the next quilt is one of my favorites. You brought this. This is Grandmother's Flower Garden.
Yes, and this was my mother's favorite. It was by my grandmother, and she keeps asking me, where is it? I'm like, Mom, it's in the cedar chest. It's fine. But it's in wonderful condition for as old as it is as well. But it would be in the 20s, 30s that this was also made and hand done by my grandmother. Yeah, really, really amazing work.
It
I
is.
look at this and I get exhausted just looking at
Yeah,
it.
it's beautifully hand quilted and is wonderfully pieced. It's a really true example of grandmother's flower garden.
Yeah.
And the last quilt that we've got that's hanging on the wall back there it's kind of a grown-up version of Sunbonnet Sue, which
Yeah.
is also in our
Right.
grandmother's quilt,
So
our granny quilt.
my grandmother gave me this in the late 60s, early 70s, and I wrapped up in it every night. So it's well loved for sure. And I never knew the name of it. I just thought it was, a little girl, and I was the only little girl in the family, so she made that for me. And I have treasured that quilt for many years now. I'm not going to tell you how old I am because that would tell you.
Well, you look fabulous, darling.
I wake up like this.
Absolutely. Well, this whole endeavor started around 2009 when you brought the idea. It lay dormant for about 10 years.
10 years.
And then we thought, in a couple of months, we'll just write a novel.
Yeah,
No,
as you do.
It took 2 years for us to write this, and we did collaborate on the story. There were things that you would write that I would then expand upon, and there would be times when I would bring something to the table, and it's really it's an adventure. It's a real big adventure, and we would just get lost in the whole process.
It was wonderful. It's true that characters start to write themselves. They come alive, and then they start taking you on the journey. It's really wonderful. Yeah. But to be able to have a project that also has not only a pattern that you can now go and make your own Lizzy Albright Granny's sampler quilt, you have a fabric line too that goes with it. It was wonderful. It's all right there for everybody. It's easy and it's done.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And the crazy thing is that the story ended up writing itself. We had our own ideas, but it was like a quilt that I would design. I got my ideas for it, but the quilt had a voice, and this story had its own voice.
Exactly.
And I was like, will we ever make it to 60,000 words? Is it even possible to do 60,000 words? And we ended up with 90,000 words. So it's a really full story, written for middle grades, really,
right.
But it's for young adults of all ages. You want to do this with your kids and grandkids and make it a full family thing.
Absolutely.
So now, here's what's going to happen. When we come back after the break, I'm going to be sharing the bear paw block.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm going to be doing it supersize.
Okay.
It's a perfect project for youngsters. So get a youngster, bring them in, and work on this project together. I'll teach you how to do that right after the break. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. The Quilt Show, although right now we look like we're on the welding show. Kat, you look fabulous. Of course, Kat was done up in the first segment, but this is my friend Kat Bowser, and you look great.
Thank you. You look fabulous.
So we're going to be teaching you the bear paw block, and this is going to be, actually, I'm teaching you.
Yeah.
Because you are not a quilter.
I am not.
But you will be.
Okay. You say so.
I do hope that you've got a youngster, because I have made this bear paw block oversized, because the larger that it is, actually, the easier it is to make, because the margin for error can be a little bit better at that. So I want to just look at the block for a moment, and let's talk about the reason that I have made it 21 inches, all right? So, Kat, you're going to have to put your thinking cap on. Let's do some math.
Oh.
Let's talk about this. If you look across the top, there are segments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if there are 7 segments this direction, there are also 7 segments the next direction, and 7 segments, if it works into 21 inches, all right, this is where the math comes in.
Okay.
How big are each of these segments?
7 segments, 21 inches. 3 inches each.
3 inches each. Actually, that's perfect. You have done very well.
Yay.
All right, now let's do some more math. 2 of these, 3 plus 3 is?
6.
6. So the length of this seam with the black plaid is how long?
6.
6. And since it's a square, it would be 6
by 6.
by 6. Perfect. Let's go to the center square. It looks like the other, so it's easy.
So it's 3 as well.
3 inches as well. And now let's talk about the width of this strip would be
3.
3. But now, be careful. This was 6, right? And this is?
3.
So how long is this strip?
9.
All right, that gives you all the math to make this quilt. We've got 3 by 9s, we've got 3 by 3s, we've got 6 by 6s, and we've got a lot of 3-inch squares, but some of them are what we call half-square triangles. Now, in quilting, You can't just cut a 3-inch square and end up with a 3-inch square because there's seams on the back. If I show you the back of this quilt, you'll see that everywhere we sew it together, it has a seam that we call a 1/4-inch seam. So now let's do some more math.
Oh boy.
Let's go back to this 3-inch square. If I add a 1/4 inch on one side and a 1/4 inch to the other side, how much am I adding?
A 1/2 inch.
I'm adding a 1/2 inch. So that would be cut 3.5 by 3.5. In quilting terms, when we're dealing with squares and rectangles, whatever the finished size is must have a 1/2 inch added onto it.
Okay.
So this would be cut 3.5 by 3.5. This big long strip would be cut 3.5 by
9.5.
9.5. And this 6-inch square would be cut
6.5.
6.5
By 6.5.
by 6.5. Now, if you're doing this with an adult that's already a quilter, they can help you learn how to use your rotary cutter in your fabric to cut that, because that's pretty standard and pretty easy process. But it's these half square triangles that can be a little bit tricky. And there's particular math for that for the traditional quilter, but to make it easy for you, we're going to overcut them, over-create them, and cut them down to size.
I like the sound of that.
All right, so to do that, we're going to start with an 8-inch square. So cut an 8-inch square from background. In this fabric, it's the lightest fabric that you see that I'm calling the background. And I've cut from my fabric stash. I'm going to just go over here and just mention these are Lizzy Albright fabrics that we're using today.
Yay.
And we'll talk about how I created these fabrics in the next segment. But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different scrappy fabrics to make my squares from. I have my background fabric, and I have the dark square for my big 6-inch squares. So I'm going to take 4 of those fabrics from my scraps, and I'm going to cut them. All right, now let's let you do the math here.
Oh, boy.
This was 8 inches square.
Okay.
So each of these squares is cut
4 inches.
4 inches, okay? Now, for normal quilters, that's slightly larger than we need, but it's okay for this project. It gives us a little fudge factor. Then I've laid them on right sides together, meaning good sides, the pattern sides face to face, and I'm going to draw with a ruler and a pen. I better put some glasses on so I can see a little better.
I'll join you.
Yeah. I'm going to draw from corner to corner. And I'm going to actually make, did it mark? It's not marking. Let's try it one more time. I know I had this. It was working when I, there it is. You know how it is. All right. Normally that would mark a little bit easier, but it's finally marked. And I'm going to mark that into a diamond. So I'm going to do all of these, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But for the sake of time, Kat, I only marked one of them.
Okay.
And what I want to do on this is I ultimately want to sew 1/4 inch on this line all the way around, 1/4 inch away. But I also want to sew 1/4 inch inside all the way around. So I'm going to do that. But for today, we're just going to sew one. Okay. Now, I'm going to send you over to the machine.
Oh boy.
Yay, this is going to be pretty exciting.
Well, I don't know if exciting is the right word, but
It is exciting, and you're going to use your 1/4 inch foot.
Yeah.
And you're going to put the left edge on the line.
Okay.
And you just simply hit the gas and sew.
Okay. And this is where I pull out my magic wand and I go, sew a la ma.
No, you don't. It doesn't work with magic.
Oh,
You have to really.
but it does
sew
in Lizzy Albright.
In Lizzy Albright, you can say all
All right.
and everything is magic.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. All right. All right, kids. If I can do this, you can do this. Ooh, this is fun.
It is fun.
Wow.
That's the crazy thing about it. And if you just keep that edge of the foot
Right on the
on
line.
the line, it's going to be great.
Okay.
That's how easy that is.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Now you would, like I said, we're going to drive all the way around.
Okay.
I've got one already done. So
Okay.
let's come over here and take a look. On this one, the stitching has been done all the way around the outside of the line and 1/4 inch all the way on the inside of the line. And if I was going to fudge at all, I would make it even a little bit less.
Okay.
Not bigger, a little bit less. Now, this gets pretty fun.
Okay.
All I need to do is take this. I'm going to put my glasses back on. I think I'll use this ruler. I think it'll work a little bit better. And I'm going to trim on the line. All right? So, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But also, I have to cut down the middle of this that's already been done. Okay. So I'm going to trim that. And so this is yielding 8 half square triangles. In the quilt, in this block, in this one block, we need 16. So you would do this twice, okay? And that's why I had 4 fabrics here, but I have 8 total, so that I can do that with. Now, you get to press.
Oh,
okay?
my favorite thing.
All right, so now I'm going to take this over to the iron.
Okay.
And I normally like this to go towards the dark side, so that I do it like this.
You go to the dark side.
I go to the dark side. I think Calixta, they'll have to learn.
Oh, Calixta goes to the dark side in the book.
Yes, in our book. So press that if you would.
All right.
Just into the seam and over. That's awesome. All right, so now this should end up being slightly bigger than 3.5 inches. So let's do a little measuring here. And I'm looking, and I'm going, yep, it is bigger, okay? So to make this 3.5 inches, you can get your square ruler out and look for the 1, 2, 3.5 inch mark, the 1, 2, 3.5 inch mark, and put this right on the diagonal seam. And I like to trim both sides, so I can be as accurate as possible. I'm going to trim that one, and I'm then going to flip it around and do the same thing so that I'm on the 3.5 inch for each of those. And so even if you were not able to be perfectly accurate, it's very forgiving, and you've now got your 3.5 inch squares that you can then use in the block. Let me get it going the right way. All right, so now we have cut all the pieces that we need. This is a sample of how this gets sewn together. You've got your 4 6-inch squares. You've got your 4 3 by 9 inches, and remember to add a 1/2 inch to every one.
All right.
You've got your center square, that's 3.5, or is 3, but 3.5. You've got 4 that are going to be 3.5 that are out of the background fabric, and then you've got your 16 triangles. If you will put, do you agree with me?
I agree.
You
I agree.
You agree?
I agree.
We agree?
I agree.
Would you tell them exactly why I'm saying that?
I agree, because I agree is a character in the Lizzy Albright book. So we just kept discussing the book and saying, do you want to do this? Oh, I agree. No. I agree. I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
I agree. And we created a character named I Agree.
I agree.
Yeah, that happened.
He's great.
Yeah, so
He's
I
bang.
agree with you. All right, so these 2 fabrics are going to get sewn together to create a unit. And that unit will then get put on, right? These 3 will get sewn together and they get put on. And that's what's happened over here. I've already got these 2 units. I've got these 3 units. They get put on. To finish the block, you actually have to make this entire section with this, this, and this, which actually looks exactly like the top one that's all sewn together. The middle one is simply put these 2 on, and now you've got your top, middle, and bottom, and you join them together. And if you'll hand me the finished block, this is the 21-inch oversized bear paw block that you can make. It's fabulous. I love the bear paw block.
Bang.
It's bang! And that's another secret, okay, because that means cool, right? We have bears in our book.
We do.
We have Baron. Burris, Violet.
Violet.
Yeah, we do. So you'll have to check that out. I want to show you a picture of 6 of these blocks put together with some sashing strips and squares. This is something that you could make with 21-inch blocks. If you just simply make 6 of these, you've got a really good lap quilt, snuggle quilt for, sitting on the couch watching Well, let's watch the Lizzy Albright movie
the
when
movie,
it comes out,
that's
right? and that would be a fun thing for you to do. So we're making these not from the Lizzy Albright book, because this is the pattern book for the Lizzy Albright quilt, and these blocks are only 8 inches. The crazy thing is, some of these blocks are 9 patches. Now, those of you that are quilters, you understand that putting a 9 patch in an 8-inch block, that math doesn't work very well at all.
I don't get it.
But I'm going to solve that secret when we come back after the break.
Great.
Yeah, we're going to do that, make it really easy and not have to do any math. So don't go anywhere. Kat and I'll be back right after the break. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to have a little fun with the Lizzy Albright quilt.
Yeah, bang!
Bang! And I wanted to tell you that the quilt was actually made from fabrics that I designed for Ben Artex, and I think it was a fun process to go through.
Absolutely.
We're really pushing into the details, and I just want to kind of sweep across to let you see the different fabrics that I've designed. And the idea, because it was a Depression-era quilt, we needed to actually create fabrics that might have looked like they actually came from the 30s, right? Actually, 1930, because that's the year that Esther McHale made the quilt. So I went to one of my inspirations, which was an antique quilt that I have in my collection. Now, this is a crazy quilt that I purchased from Julie Silber, and Julie has a lovely collection, and I just love the craziness of this. But these are old fabrics. They may not totally date back to 1930, but they certainly have that old look. And one particular fabric is a fabric with these little tilted squares, and I thought it was just almost an ugly fabric, but it's so true to the time period.
But it's the ugly duckling. You bring
And
it to
I
me.
always called this one the pajama fabric.
Oh, perfect.
And so I thought it would be fun, because in the story Lizzy Albright, not only do we describe the quilt, we describe the era, and Granny talks about the Great Depression and what their family went through. There's also a little section here that describes the fabrics. So I'm going to have you read that for us, Kat,
Okay.
with your lovely reading voice.
Yeah.
And I'm going to point to the fabrics as you do, okay?
Great. Perfect.
All right.
All right. Lizzy surveyed the quilt and noticed all the different fabrics. There were plaids, checkerboards, and dots. One fabric had maraschino cherries on it,
that would be
which
this
made
guy
her
right
think of
here.
the cherry that Doug stole from her banana split earlier in the afternoon. Another design had little sunbursts splashed around on a dotted background. A fabric with small tilted squares reminded her of Alan's pajamas. She giggled when she found the singing roosters and shrieked with delight when she saw the fabric with the Scottish Terrier puppies. That's my favorite one, too.
Of course, because we do have a Scottish Terrier as a main character in the book. His name is
McDougal.
McDougal, and Lizzy affectionately calls him
McDoo.
Absolutely. So the fabrics, of course, you don't have to make the Lizzy Albright quilt with these fabrics, but if you're trying to be really
you're all in,
authentic, if
yeah.
you're all in, this is what you would want to do to replicate the quilt that we believe to be a true quilt, even though it's a fiction quilt. So in this particular demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the double 9 patch, and let me just kind of bring it over to give you the idea of where we're going. Now, most quilters would go, that's pretty easy if you do 3, 3, 3. That would be a 9-inch block, and that's typically how this could fly. But to put this into an 8-inch block, the math goes really crazy, and I don't do math.
Nope.
You don't do math either, right? So in the book, you're going to find throughout, in any section that has a block that doesn't fit well into an 8-inch, you're going to see that we've got these trimming guides. This is a trimming guide that's perfectly sized. You would think of it as a template, but we're going to use it on the rotary cutter. And here's a template that would also, you could just cut out and use template plastic, but we're going to use it on the rotary cutter. So this is the 2 pieces that you would need for this block. And the instructions are going to say that you need to cut some 1.5 by 16-inch strips. And in this case, I've got 2 darks and a light. And here are 1.5 by 9-inch strips. So there's 2 lights with a dark in the middle. So to use the trimming guide, I'm going to put this on the mat, and I have cut out and placed the trimming guide with tape onto the back side and made sure it's right along the edge. So that when I flip this over now and place this on my strip, I'm going to put this edge of my template onto the edge of the fabric, and now I can simply use my rotary cutter to shave off that little extra with no measuring. And then I need to move it down the way a little bit more. I like to leave my rotary cutter in place and then align, except it wants to slide on me today, of course. Align up that and then finish cutting. And now I'll lose this little bit, okay, that tiny little sliver goes away, but I'm going to have the right width for using my regular 1/4-inch stitch. Now, most quilters know that that's almost always a scant 1/4-inch stitch. So these strips are all going to get now trimmed to that special width using that template. Because the block has 4 regular just squares, I'm going to use this fabric, and honestly, I can layer it into 4, and I can do the same thing on a square ruler. I have taped the template onto the back side, and I can lay this down. I tend to be I'm an oversized guy.
I was just going to say, let's not talk about oversized.
I'm an oversized guy. Because when you're oversized, you can trim it down. And I'm able to do all 4 of these at one time. Now, I'll just flip this. Oh, you didn't do that on me. You did.
Well, people are watching,
Of course. And I flip this around, and now I can put the edges of this template right there, and I have all 4 of those pieces ready to go. So those are ready to go, and I have my strips that I've already sewn together. So in this particular case, I have to cut 10 units, and I'm back to using my same width that I made for the strips is the size that I want to cross cut. So I'm going to make my first cut to make a fresh cut on the edge, right across, and then get rid of that guy, flip it to the other side so that I can now just put the edge right on there, and I will do 10 of these. 1, I'm not going to do all 10 of them. 2.
Or you can do this, Ricky. You can go cut all of them.
Cut all of them. Bang.
Bang. That's how we do it in Lizzy world.
That's how Lizzy would do it, that's for sure. Anyway, I continue cross-cutting these units. I would also cross-cut 5 of these units. And once you have your units cross-cut and you're going to make 9 patches, most of you certainly know where we're headed now because you have your unit, the other unit, and this unit. And those, so 10 of these, 5 of these, this ends up making the 3-inch. Well, it's not a 3-inch square. We don't want to say that because it's not. It wouldn't be right at all. But because it's done using this method with these cutting guides, the trimming guides, when you finish it up, you can see that it's going to be perfectly 8.5 inches, which means it's going to sew into an 8-inch block and finish up that way. I found that to be the most challenging part of creating the Lizzy Albright quilt for me was to figure out a way that this could be easy for any quilter and not have to do crazy math with the rotary cutting.
Which people like me appreciate.
So, Kat, thank you so much for being on this journey with me. I mean, in all seriousness, we have been friends for a very long time, and I look at the fact that our journey has been a musical journey more than anything. Tell everyone a little bit. You've done some great things with your career.
I've had a wonderful career in music industry. I've been able to sing on the road and tour with Oleta Adams. She did Get Here, which was a fantastic song that she recorded. Yeah. I had the honor of being on the road with John Cicada, which was a Miami artist that sang with Gloria Estefan. And then I also had the triple honor of being on the same bill with Tony Bennett. So that was kind of a major highlight, obviously, in my
That's
life.
great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, seriously, and you guys, lucky us, because we're going to get to hear Kat at the end of the credits, so you want to stick around for that as well. It's been a wonderful journey, and to write Lizzy Albright with you, it's been an interesting collaboration because neither one of us are novelists.
No.
But now we are.
Well, yeah,
Now
I'm putting that on the resume.
and then whenever I think about this whole journey with you, it's been, I mean, we would come up with ideas together. You wrote things, I wrote things. It's been a very shared experience.
Absolutely.
But a very rewarding experience.
But my coming up with things was more the big picture. This one over here fills in all the details, and beautifully so, I must say, my friend.
I will say, I wanted the details when I wanted to see, like, how did they dress in the land of Alair?
Yeah.
I wanted the details all the way down to the lacings on the legs or whatever. So it's a very visual book, and it was a fun collaboration, and I hope that you'll take the journey along with us as well. Thank you.
The possible sequel.
Oh my gosh, we will. Oh, we're going to have sequels. Could be Lizzy Albright in the log cabin.
It's in the quilt.
Could be Lizzy Albright in the storm at sea.
It's in the quilt.
That's a possibility. We'll just have to wait and see.
That's right.
Okay, because we don't even know yet.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you so much, Kat. I don't want to not say thank you. It's been fabulous. We've got a wonderful segment coming up next. This is Joe and Mary Koval, and they actually have antique quilt business. They have had exhibitions with their quilts, and they have a new book. It's going to be a fun thing for you to see, and it certainly relates to all Lizzy Albright with the old quilts. So don't go anywhere. We're going to enjoy that right after the break.
On the next quilt show, we have Tara Fonin. She likes to make quilts that mess with your eyes.
I sure do.
Well, I can't wait to see what you're going to teach. So what's up your sleeve for us?
We're going to talk about color interaction, yes, and hand quilting.
Yes,
From a lefty.
Yes. And then the cameras take off to go to the studio of Diana McClellan. She is a mentor of mine, and we are in a mini group with her, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of really good stuff coming up on the next quilt show.
My name is Mary Koval, and I live in Shellsburg, Pennsylvania. I am known for antique fabrics, antique quilts, and I am a fabricaholic. I have over 100,000 pieces of antique fabric, so I think I'm the winner. Our exhibit is called Piece by Piece. This exhibit, and I do get emotional, is about our life. We've been doing it for 45 years, and we have bought and sold many collections. This is one of our folk art quilts that we purchased, and we bought it from a picker who told us that he had a quilt that was elongated with an eagle in the center. We said, oh, it's probably something wrong with it because normally they're long and not wide, and when we saw it, we just had to buy it. It hangs in our living room, and on occasion we'll take it down and hang something else, and after 2 days we take that down and put this back out. In our collection, we used to have around 400 quilts. We now have basically 40 to 50 quilts left in our collection because we've weeded out, but we still have a little bit of everything.
This quilt's an Amish quilt made in 1939. It's an original design. It's called Propellers. And the inspiration was Lindbergh's flight. The person that made it actually had to have permission from the bishop to make this quilt. There's inscriptions on the bottom that have Lindbergh's name on it in his flight from New York to Paris.
Most people think that quilting started in the United States, but actually quilting has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. I think the earliest quilt that I've ever seen dated in the U.S. was 1751, but I've been to Europe and I've seen quilts that were done in 15 and 1600. This is one of my favorite quilts because Joe bought this quilt. It's one of those things he brought home and said, look what I found. I told him it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen because this is a Bannister Hall print. Bannister Hall is a printer in England. I have never, in all the 100,000 pieces of fabric I have or have seen, a panel done of this type. and it's very, very rare. So I was totally excited. So he got a double thumbs up on it. I am a quilter first. I started quilting in 1970, and I continued to quilt until Joe and I went to an auction. I saw an antique quilt. It sold for $7.50, and I said, wow, I could buy other people's work and sell it.
The quilt is called the Stairway to Heaven. It's made by the Amish in 1940. And this is one of the quilts that got away from us. We were at a show. I said, Mary, we should buy this. She said, no, I think we have enough. And 20 years later, this quilt showed up at another antique show. And I looked at Mary and she said, you know what? It's not going to get away this time. I think we'll buy it.
When someone comes to me and wants to collect quilts, the first thing I ask them is, what is it you feel and what is it you're looking for? Because you should only buy quilts if you fall in love with them. We have our sailboat quilt that's very special to us because we feel that she either wanted to take a trip or her husband was into sailboats and she used a manly fabric of the black and whites. But we have only seen 13 black and white quilts, and we owned 11.
This quilt's a 1976 bicentennial quilt. This was done in our hometown of Indiana, PA, by a woman. She was 79 years old at the time. And if you look at some of the motifs on there, there's an elephant and a donkey, and the donkey's saying, let's be friends, and the elephant says, I'll try. So things haven't changed too much since 1976. You know, I like the fact that she was able to express herself through a quilt because, you know, women couldn't express themselves very much, but in their quilting they could.
Quilts have taught me that I can get personal with the person without knowing them, just by the kind of quilt that they made. And I know things about women and areas because different fabrics were used in different parts of the world. This is a very interesting quilt to me because I started with one quilt block with just the month of May, 1881. And when I was asked to design fabric, I chose this to be my first fabric design. And I designed it for the millennium in 2001. One of my quilting friends says I have a quilt just like that, and I actually bought the quilt from her after I designed the fabric. We take the antique fabric, I sell it to other people, I reproduce the fabric, and you can make quilts that look old, and lots of people like old things. My favorite part of quilting is the quilting part, not the piecing. So I started taking antique quilts, tops, and quilting them myself. I always felt like I was finishing their work, and it made me happy, and I didn't have to do the piecing. I feel that antique quilts matter because we wouldn't quilt today if we didn't have antique quilts. If we didn't have old quilts to look at to reproduce or change. I have a quilt shop, and I've taken over the whole building. The building was built in 1814, and it was a one-family home. We have 16 beds, 4.5 baths, so it's quite large. If you'd like to know more about Joe and I, all you have to do is go to our website, Mary Koval Antique Quilts. You can find out how to purchase a book or a quilt, and we even have antique fabrics on there.
Wow, I love old quilts. They're so inspiring, and they take me on a journey. I hope they take you on a journey. The exhibit by Mary and Joe Koval of Piece by Piece was a success, and this book is one that you'll want to add to your collection. This is, of course, Piece by Piece. This is by Quilt Mania, and you can find it in your local quilt shops or out and about in the quilt world. I also want to thank Kat Bowser for being guest on the Quilt Show today. We got to share with you our passion for Lizzy Albright, and she is connected to an old quilt, and I hope that you'll enjoy perhaps making the Lizzy Albright quilt. I know that Alex Anderson would wish that she was here today because this would have been fun, but we are solo hosting during this time of pandemic. So saying hello to my co-host Alex during this time. And remember, everybody, quilting is something that we're all passionate about. I thank you for watching and being part of the Quilt Show. And always remember, it's a new day every day. Remember, we're not quite done. There's still the after set right after the credits. We're back in the McHale family mansion, and Kat, I have to tell everybody that first of all, they might have seen you before on the Quilt Show, not on the show, but because we did our Christmas concert, and every December we roll that out for people to enjoy. But you are an amazing singer. I'll never forget the day that we did our performance back in 1986, and you walked out on the stage, and it just dropped my jaw. And I'm so glad that we've been friends all these years. So we have a song for you guys to hear. Tell everybody how this came about.
Well, we decided to, obviously we needed to do an audiobook for The Attic Window, and so I decided I wanted to give my shot, and I wanted to try, so I came out to your place in Colorado and recorded the audiobook, and while we were there, we decided to create some music together.
We did, and we're going to share that with you now. It was first made famous by Kermit the Frog, Rainbow Connection. Here's Kat Bowser.
Someday we'll find it, the rainbow.
love it. I love performing with you. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Great.
Likewise, my friend.
And honestly, such a fun song to,
Oh,
to kind
of course.
to go with the magic of Lizzy Albright.
Absolutely great song.
You know, Shelley, the producer, always does interviews with the guests. So she didn't know you, so she's interviewing you. And one of the questions that always comes up is, you know, well, have you won any awards? Have you, and what did you tell her?
No, nothing.
Well, see, we at the Quilt Show, we like to make dreams come true. So we actually are going to give you an award today. This is awarded to Kat Bowser. You are the best ever.
Yes. ...
So whatever you want to be the best
I'm
at.
filling that in.
The best ever singer, the best ever co-writer for a novel, the best ever friend in the world.
Oh my gosh.
See,
and now I'm an award winner.
So here you go.
Oh, I'm so
here's
honored.
your award. There's your award.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
now you are an award winner. I hope you enjoy that so very much.
That's wonderful.
Kat, thank you. This has been an amazing journey. Just writing Lizzy Albright has
Agreed.
been an amazing adventure, something that neither one of us ever thought we could do.
That's right.
And so here's to dreams come true. And thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you. Cheers.